All right, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the shelf. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by Mr. M.T. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So, for anyone who doesn't know, Mr. M.T. Anderson is an award-winning author. He's written everything from novels to picture books, spanning a wide array of genres. So, I've been a fan of yours for a very long time. So, it's a real pleasure to have you on today.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. So here on this channel, obviously, we mainly talk about films, but something that me and a lot of my viewers really value is just good stories and great writing. So I trust that you'll be right at home here for that discussion. So
Yeah, and in fact, as I mentioned to you before we began, I'm also a huge horror fan. So ever since like at age 12 or 13 or so, I saw The Thing.
oh,
John
awesome.
Carpenter's The Thing, which was like at once a great way into horror because it's like one of the best horror movies ever. But on the other hand, is a tough entry to horror because then the bar is set so high.
Yeah, I mean that's like the benchmark, right? For like
Exactly.
practical effects and everything is so excellent. Wow. All right, a man after my own heart. I think
Yeah.
we got a thing fan here. Excellent. I think we're gonna get along really well. So this is great. So, real quick, I do know that you would just spent some time in Asia. So I was wondering if you might want to maybe talk a little bit about that for the viewers. Just maybe tell a little bit about your trip there.
Yeah, yeah. I just came back from a month teaching, 2 weeks in Nepal and 2 weeks in China, in like in Hong Kong, and just it was totally fascinating. Even if was incredibly hard work. I mean, it was sometimes going to as many as like four schools a day and talking to kids. But yeah, just super to see. Like, it's so fascinating to see the way that the like with teenagers especially, the affect of teenagers in different countries is so different. Like, we really do, it's so interesting the way that we are colored by our cultures in ways that we don't even recognize. You know what I mean? So that was kind of just fascinating to see.
Yeah, I follow you on Instagram, and some of the pictures you were posting are so cool. And I was really, I mean, I found myself scrolling through every one because I was so intrigued by the work you were doing there, and like you said, just the kind of the paradigm shift of the culture is
Yeah.
it's something that you don't really notice until it's right in front of your face. So
Absolutely. Well, like, for example, I was there for Tibetan New Year in Nepal as it happened. And so, big Tibetan community there. And so there are these like dances that the monks do, dressed up in these wild costumes, which are in the particular monastery I went to, they were like the gods of the sacrificial dagger. So they're all dressed like these sort of like either animal spirits or sort of wrathful deities, and they're dancing, doing these slow dances. And what they do is they dance around a bunch of effigies of all of the obstacles for the coming year. And then they actually fire arrows at the obstacles to kind of like overcome them. And then they just douse them with gasoline and burn the crap out of them,
wow.
while still doing these slow dances around them. It was just like, it's just fascinating. I really kind of feel accidentally cleansed by my tourism.
That's so cool, man. I mean, because not only are you there doing what I would say is a great thing, and but it's also good for you as well, just to kind of expand your horizons and really soak up,
Totally.
just as good for them as it was for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, even to say something about like the kind of movies that you and I like, that kind of thing, like any way that we can contact something that makes our own world kind of seem alien is really powerful and really useful, because suddenly you look around at your own world and you're like, wait, uh, I don't have to live the way that I thought that I had to live.
Hmm.
Like, there are all these options out there that humans take. Is this the best one, the way that I'm going? You know what I mean? And that, I just think, is so useful and powerful.
Yeah, we're all products of our own environment in a way, and that's sort of the power of not only books but films as well, like you just mentioned. Like I obviously we love horror films on this channel, and I like to check out. I like to watch ones from like the '60s and especially foreign ones, like Japanese horror is really interesting. Films like Kwaidan and Kuroniko and Onibaba are like so just so drastically different, and it's like I find myself, it's hard to sort of get your mind in the place that it needs to be in order to properly consume something like that, because it's so, radically different. And but I always find myself having been enriched for it after the fact. So it's
Yeah.
something that you really, is there's a lot of value to it.
Yeah, well, and you go in thinking like, oh, the monsters will be different than our monsters. But in fact, you start to realize, wait, the whole structure of the way that they feel about like marriage or having children or,
Yeah.
hospitality or whatever, like these things, like it's all so acculturated. And then suddenly you're in this movie and you realize, wait, like there's a whole, world going on that I haven't had contact with before. And it's kind of cool to see the different ways, just to think of a horror trope, the way that like in our like 80s or 90s slasher films, like the certain things are assumed about what high school is,
Hmm.
like the cheerleader and the popularity and the blah, 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 totally not true in other places. And it's kind of interesting to see the
Yeah.
way that things differ.
There's like this shorthand between the filmmaker and the audience, and it does a lot of work for exposition wise, right? Because but that's not a given when I'm watching like a French horror film or something. Like there might be some nuance there that
Yeah.
I'm not picking up on just because that's not my culture.
Yeah. Well, so this is not like on topic of like it's weird strangeness, but okay. Have you seen the French movie? It's called They or Them, I think in translation. It's ILS in French.
No, I
Uh,
haven't, but I've heard of this film before.
okay, so it's like a home invasion horror thing.
Okay.
And it's set in, even though it's a French movie about like a French author in the, I think it's like Eastern European countryside. One of the interesting cultural things is I was told by a French friend, the French have a deep distrust of Eastern Europe, which they see as like a place where everyone is, which has a certain emotional brutality left over from the Soviet period or something.
Right.
So this movie plays off of that, couple in a giant house in the middle of this strange country and someone's hunting them. And I got to tell you, like the first 5 minutes of that film are some of the best, like the best hook kind of discomfort moments that I've ever seen in a movie.
It's called ILS, right? Is that how
In
you?
French, il, and I think it's either
Right.
they or them in translation.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
something that's been on my radar, but just for one reason or another haven't caught it. But I have heard that about that. And what was I about to say? Oh, there's this movie. It's more recent, from a couple years back. I think it's maybe perhaps Swedish. It's called Speak No Evil or something. And
Whoa.
they just did an American remake with James McAvoy last year. But the whole conceit of that is that there's this couple and they have a child and they meet this other couple who, they might be the same. They might be from a different country, but they are hanging out with them and they're spending a lot of time with them. But there's a lot of these like weird social cues that they're doing that they find very uncomfortable, and all the red flags are there as the viewer for them to want to leave the situation. But because of their culture, they perhaps they find it rude or something like that. They can't bring themselves to remove themselves from the situation, which is so clearly what they need to do. But and then it winds up being like sort of their downfall, right? So like that's something that in that culture, whenever it's killing me. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's a Swedish film, but
Yeah.
I can't recall.
Yeah.
But so for American audiences, we might watch something like that and just be yelling at the screen the whole time, like just leave. Excuse me.
But that sounds fantastic because I love the idea that like the only thing constraining you is politeness.
Right?
You're
Yeah.
gonna die.
Exactly.
You're gonna die because you're polite, and I
Yeah.
kind of think that that's fascinating. Yeah, that sounds great. Speak no evil. It's called.
Yeah. It ends perhaps in a really, it's kind of a downer. It's very bleak, but and I haven't seen the American remake, which I heard has a more slightly more uplifting ending. So
Okay,
we tend to
you
change
know,
things for our
I'll
audiences
swallow
here.
the bleak. I'll swallow the bleak.
Yeah, looking at some of your books, that's not something that I think you're necessarily averse to. Just as far as like leaving us off on a downer note, which is something I admire about you. But so that's all. Yeah. So Asia is awesome. I think it's really cool that you got the chance. Had you been there before, or?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been to
Okay.
both countries before. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about Nicked for a little bit here. being that it's your most recent novel. So I know that that was one that you had written necessarily. It was intended to be written for more adult audiences as opposed to YA. So talk to me just about what the reception has been to Nicked. How have people been finding it? And has it changed the way that you think about telling stories at all? In the sense that Nicked is based on a real events, and have you had perhaps any more ideas swirling about other unique twists that you could put on, real events or anything?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the idea for the listeners who don't know it, so
Oh
Nicked
yeah.
is a novel which is about it's based on a real event, a real heist, which is that weirdly enough, not only is Santa Claus like Saint Nicholas real, he was a real, bishop in the fourth century A.D., but also his corpse was actually stolen from its tomb and by a bunch of Italian thieves and taken to Italy. And the reason it was taken to Italy was because supposedly Santa Claus's corpse like drooled this magical liquid that if you drank it, it would heal anything. So that's why they wanted it. And they wanted it to kind of like glorify their city, the city of Bari in southern Italy. So anyway, those are the real events, and I heard about that, and it was just so weird. And also the fact that Santa Claus, if you look at the stories about him that circulated, really for most like for 1,000 years after his death or more, like for 1,500 years after his death, they are much more bizarre than any of the silly kind of like North Pole elf myths that we made up in the 19th century, about Santa Claus. So, for example, like one of the reasons he's connected with children is that there were three boys supposedly who were traveling during a famine, and they stopped overnight at an inn, and the innkeeper realized, wait a second, these boys are worth more as meat than they are as guests. So he killed them, pickled their bodies, and then was serving them to people. And St. Nicholas came along, discovered this, and actually pulled them out of the pickling brine, reattached the flesh to them, and they came back to life. They were, revived. So,
Wow.
like, not a story that there's like a claymation special about. You
No,
know what I mean?
the
But like,
Rankin Bass thing.
yeah, right,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
right. Yes, a Rankin Bass one, right?
That's them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But or the fact that gift giving is associated with Santa Claus because he saved three girls from being sold into prostitution by their own father by throwing bags of gold secretly through their window at night so that they would have money so they wouldn't have to be sold off. Things like that. So much, much more extreme. So I was totally fascinated by that, and I decided to turn it into a modern heist novel. So I did some research, and like I definitely changed some things because I wanted to make it a little more Hollywood, a little more trashy.
A little more like Ocean's 11 kind of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, right. Yeah. And then, but the weird thing is that when I was about halfway through the book, I discovered all these documents relating to that heist that had never been translated before. So to answer your question about where I'm going next, like I'm actually going to now do, I know this is weird, but I'm now going to do a nonfiction book for teens about the real events in that heist, which in some ways are very similar to what I wrote, but in some ways very different. So, and both equally weird, like as they say, like truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's kind of like where I'm going next. It'll come out next year. It's going to be, yeah, it's about this kind of medieval heist.
That's very interesting. So that'll function sort of as like a companion piece to Nicked in a way. Like
Right. Yeah.
if you want to
Yeah.
read maybe perhaps the less dramatized version of the events for those
Right.
who just kind of want the the hard facts, so to speak.
Well, what was weird was that it was just dramatic in a different way. Like I had written the book based on partial facts. So I had to make stuff up that was dramatic. But it turned out that there were other facts that had been concealed that are equally dramatic, just, yeah, just
Mm.
different. So that's kind of why I decided to do it, because I was like, oh my God, this is still a great story. And weirdly enough, it's not exactly the story I told in the novel.
Interesting. So Nicked could perhaps look different than it does now had you maybe found those earlier.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Interesting.
But, like they'd never been translated. I don't speak Latin. So I had to hire like sad graduate students to translate the things for me. And they did a fantastic job. And yeah.
Very cool. So I just reread it again the other day. Really enjoyed it. Um, so, but like so, as I was saying, is there perhaps a chance you'd want to take this approach to storytelling to some other crazy historical event or?
Totally. One thing I'm thinking about, right, so the town I live in is, I live in a very small town in the middle of the mountains in Vermont, like very, very rural, that kind of thing. And there are a lot of weird stories of stuff that has gone on here. And one of my favorites is that on one night in 1843, at this, like, picture one of those beautiful chilly white New England churches, right, up on a hill. The inhabitants of the town decided that the world was going to end on one night in 1843, that at
Wow.
midnight time would stop. So they dragged a grandfather clock to the front of that church to like count down the final moments of time. And they all made for themselves white robes that they could ascend into heaven in. And they all stood there in that church. And here's the thing, they thought the world was going to end, so they'd given away all of their land to other people because they're like, we're not going to freaking need it. And then they had also not planted any crops that summer because they didn't think they were going to have to eat over the winter. And so then, so like, midnight comes, the chimes start to ring on the clock. Like, people are fainting, people are crying, screaming, singing hymns. It's all crazy. And then, like, it's 12:02, 12:03, 12:04. World still has an end. By like 12:15, the church was empty, and everyone knew that they were screwed.
Wow.
So that, I think, would make a really good book.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And just that visual of the grandfather clock in front of the church is very striking. Like I feel like I can sort
Yeah.
of see that in my mind.
Right. And imagine like all those people like going into these kind of spasms all around it. And then supposedly some other townspeople were outside looking in through the windows, being like, oh my God, what's going on in there? So like, yeah.
That's very interesting. I would definitely read something like that. So yeah, so I actually got the chance to reread a couple of your books because we had talked about this like a little over a month ago now. So it was actually perfect because it gave me some time to kind of brush up on some stuff. And
Thank you.
yeah, of course. And I reread my copy of Feed, and I was just, man, I hadn't read it in many years, and I was really struck by just how, and I'm sure you hear this a lot with Feed, but just how sort of, of the times it is. And I was just like, really blown away by that because, I'm reading it and, it seems like you predicted a lot of things. Again, I'm sure you hear about this a lot, but like there's, for example, the main character's little brother, I believe his name is Smell Factor, um, is like watching this. Like, are you familiar with Coco Melon at all? It's like this child's programming. I have nephews, and they used to watch it when they were small, and it's just this kind of very mindless. I mean, it's for children, right? But it's
Mhm.
I was like, this sounds like Coco Melon, right? This thing that Smell Factor's watching, and
Yeah.
then there's obviously like Instagram and like YouTube Reels, like this constant flow of information, and there's Amazon, basically people just buying stuff, and there's like some AI in there,
Yeah.
and a certain political figure who may or may not be prominent right now.
Okay, dude. Well, first of all, so the book was written in like 2001. And just once again, for the viewers who don't know it, it's a book in which a sort of science fiction satire in which everyone has a chip in their head, which gives them instant internet access without typing, without a screen. But on the other hand, everyone has become incredibly stupid as a result of the fact that they also have a constant stream of advertising running through their thoughts, responding to their dreams. It's even in their dreams. Um, so yeah, I did not expect that it was going to become as true as it is. And the weirdest thing is that there is a very, let's say, profane president in it.
Hmm.
Uh,
This is
um,
the part that really uh,
and, and I had to be reminded. Someone actually put on Twitter like 6 or 7 years ago, I'd forgotten that I named that president Trumbull.
Yeah.
And so some reader was like, "Oh, were you making fun of Trump there?" I was like, "No, it was 2001. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have thought that Trump was going to be president back then. It totally was a coincidence." So super freaking weird, that one.
Yeah, it's just so interesting, and it's very it's like 1984 or anything where these things are, um they always seem so ahead of their time, but it's in reality, I believe it's because the authors are writing about the time in which they're sort of living in, right? And then so
Totally.
and unfortunately, things don't really ever change, right? It's like sort of things, they change, but they stay the same. So it's like, of course, these things always feel that way. But yeah, I was just struck by the particular ways in which, like, down to like Amazon and all that stuff, like and just the way that Titus, like, I was really moved by emotionally this time around, especially
Mm,
the ending. But just the way that Titus is like, because of the way that he's lived his whole life, he's not able to uh, you know, he's not available emotionally when he
no.
really needs to be. And like the whole time I'm like just wanting to reach through the pages and like kind of smack him. And it was just, yeah, it was just really affected me.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like a wake up call kind of, you know what I mean?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the things I set out to do, was to have like the narrator of the book actually weirdly be kind of unable to really explain his world to you,
Yeah.
because like he's too immersed in it. This is kind of actually weirdly going back to what we were saying in the first part of this show, right?
Yeah.
Like in the same way that like the people in the Swedish movie you're talking about are unable to kind of get around their culture to save themselves. He's just like, he's kind of oblivious to the thing, to the way that he lives. And so he's
Yeah.
actually kind of like, I wanted the reader to feel claustrophobic, like, please, no.
Yeah. Yeah. These all these deeply profound human things are happening to him, and he's just unable to process it. And in a sense, I feel like that's something that is, perhaps like relatable,
Yeah,
in today's world.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I wanted to touch about that. I wanted to talk about that briefly, just because I find Feed to be such a timeless work, and it's one of my favorites of yours for sure.
Oh, that, thank you.
Of course, of course. And so, I did mention that I had watched Landscape with Invisible Hand, because
Yeah,
I hadn't seen it yet, and I really enjoyed this one too. It's really breezy, and I think in some ways, perhaps a spiritual sequel to Feed. Um,
totally. Yeah. Yeah. The way I thought of it was, Feed is about a world where you're always being sold to, which seemed right in that time. But then Landscape with Invisible Hand is about the world. I mean, when did I write it? Like 2016, something like that. 2017, I think. Anyway, it was about a world where it's the opposite. We are always having to sell ourselves. I mean, like, you're selling yourself to get your show more watches. I'm selling myself to sell more copies of books. But also, just like incidentally, like you mentioned my Instagram feed, like, why do we do that shit? Part of it is because we are part of this kind of like weird self-defining world where you have to sell yourself to people online. And like, you don't show the fact that, for example, when I was traveling, I had like some kind of stomach thing that I got from food a lot of the time. Like, you don't experience the fact that I'm spending a lot of time in the bathroom on the crapper.
just like this book.
No, oh, actually, yeah, that's right. Yeah, there
Yeah.
is some. Yeah, it was funny. The kid who plays the main kid, so Asante Black, the actor who plays that kid in the book, they changed a lot about the plot in the movie. And when I met him, he was like, "They took out all my shit jokes." I was like, "Sorry, buddy. Yeah.
It's so funny because I was actually, when I was going to watch it, I was like, I wonder if that's in the movie, like, because it's not very cinematic, which is
No,
why you chose. I would presume that is why you chose to kind of have that be component of the story, right? Because it's like on the surface, he's broadcasting this sort of this love show. I mean, so for people
yeah.
who don't know,
Oh, sorry, yeah,
no, I keep forgetting. I'm presuming that everyone is familiar already. But so in this story, the two main characters wear these sort of nodes on their head, and their planet has been inhabited by aliens. and these aliens have no concept of love. They don't really understand it. They don't express it the way humans do. So they're fascinated by it for this reason. And so humans will do this thing where they broadcast it to them, and then they can observe it, sort of. And where was I going with this?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and so one of the problems is that in fact they now they have monetized these this boy and this girl have monetized their relationship,
Yes.
but at the same time, like it has all the usual stresses, like and he has this weird syndrome where he always is like he always has the shits. So there are all these things that they have to take out, but also they I mean it's a teenage romance. Like we watch all these teenage romances as if the love is forever, but from your own experience that teenage romance lasts like 3 weeks. So they kind of like start to fight, but they can't fight because everything has to appear perfect on their feed. And to me, like that was very visceral because of course, like we're all like curating versions of our own life online now, and like we're all art gallery owners or something, like putting all this stuff out there. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be a teenager like right now when your whole relationship and the parties you go to and all of that crap has to somehow appear a certain way online. Like I mean, I know from talking to teens that a lot of them hate that part of things, like that's
Yeah.
part of what drives them crazy. So I don't know, like the fact that it's so unsafe, everything feels always visible, that's kind of one of the things I wanted to get at.
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially for someone my age. I'm 31, so I sort of grew up alongside all of this stuff. So I can
Yeah,
remember a time where there was no social media, but obviously I was kind of there just in time to kind of catch the full brunt of it. So I'm on both ends of the spectrum, sort of, and I'm old enough now that it doesn't. Obviously I'm not I'm still playing the game, so to speak, but I kind of care less as I kind of grow and become more, I guess, sure of myself, or those things that happen as you age. But I can see it also for my nephews who are younger, so I can only imagine what it must be like growing up now and being young now, where all is sort of the presence of the internet. It's really
yeah,
it's kind of bleak, honestly, to think about, but
yeah,
but I trust that the kids will be all right.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, like I always, like it was important to be able to go home from school and not have it follow you, you know, and you're kind of a different person at home sometimes, and that's probably good.
Definitely. So the thing about the landscape with invisible hand that really struck me on this reread was that so you mentioned that I do YouTube, and there's this sort of there's this urge that to like chase trends and like do things that you see is working for other people. And I was kind of struck by how in the novel Adam decides to submit the art that really speaks to him as opposed to what he thinks will be received well. So I was kind of I put myself in that situation, and I tend to try to do things that excite me creatively, rather than what I think will just kind of do well. So I found that perhaps I don't know if that was maybe intended, to be transcribed to that sort of analogy, but it
Sure.
works. It plays. Yeah, it could work for a variety of different situations. So I
Yeah.
really I was digging that plot theme for sure.
Well, and it's always so, I mean, complicated. I mean, even if you're just like, if you're playing music, yeah, I mean, like, actual playing, whatever, like if you're doing art of any kind, there's always that question of like, do I try to do something that is popular already, which can also totally fail because you can be one of like a million people who's doing the same thing now because you're not leading. But on the other hand, if you are a like bursting out into your own artistic world, will people follow? That's a tough question, and there's no
Yeah.
assurances.
No, there's really no guarantees one way or the other. So I do think at the end of the day, you're probably better off just kind of doing your own thing, because at least at the end of the day, you can say that you were true to yourself. So that's kind of what I hold myself to
Absolutely,
with,
yeah,
with, with
yeah,
YouTube. So I did want to talk about we kind of talked about it earlier with Feed and sort of the relationship between those two main characters. But so I'm looking over here because my questions are on this
Yeah.
screen. So just yeah. So I find it really interesting the way that you depict romance and romantic relationships in your work. I think of things like Burger Wuss, Thirsty, Feed, Landscape, etc. They're often bleak and ill-fated, and don't really end the way that the reader may want them to, which I actually really appreciate. And in a sense, the romance almost feels like an afterthought, but in a way that's actually really refreshing and sort of serves to remind us that there's more to a story going on, more than just whether or not these characters kind of end up together. So, is this like an intentional theme for you? And, like, where does it come from?
Well, I think romantic failure is really, I'm very familiar. Let's just say I'm very familiar with romantic failure.
I'm with you.
So,
Yeah, that's why these things speak to us, right? Because it's like
right.
this guy's telling my story. Like
Yeah.
I've seen a million of the ones where they end up together. Like
Right.
that has no punch for me anymore. Like I'd rather see.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, and like I don't know, like especially when you're younger, you go through other people. I mean, meaning like,
Yeah.
you have these relationships and they fade away and they seem like they're going to be super important, but sometimes they aren't. Like it's not necessarily a bad thing. But anyway, yeah. So I feel like just my own deep scholarship of failed relationships is what I bring to my work.
Interesting. Yeah, and and I think that really resonates with people because I do I do want to talk about Thirsty for just selfishly.
Yeah.
I find this book. I discovered it at a young age, and
Oh, good.
I think when I read this, I was maybe expecting something else, and when I finished it, I was like so floored by it, and I was like, wait, like there has to be more. I'm like, where's the rest of it? Like this isn't
Mhm.
how it ends, right? And I think that's what's kept me coming back to it so often.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
And so I know this was your first novel, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to ask you, like, what is your relationship with this book like now? How has it changed over time? And you know, yeah, just what are your thoughts on it now, all these years
Well,
later?
like one of the weird things about writing is like I don't read my books when I'm done with them. So that's a book that was written like when I was 24 and I'm now like 30 years older than that.
Right.
So I have not read it for a very long time. I did feel though that I wanted to end on that. It's a complicated note because there is some stuff, I don't want to give anything away, some stuff that's tremendously good. Like crisis in one way is averted, but it's not necessarily averted for the main character, right? And I wanted that partially because I feel like that is somehow how life is, but also because like the whole thing about like the teen savior of the world, the chosen one, I was always like, uh, that just seems really unlikely, you know? And especially because like I wrote it, it's so okay. This is actually to answer your question a little bit better. One of the things that's weird about some of me now reading my early work is like at age 24, I thought of myself, of course, as like an adult. Like it had been 5 years since I was a teenager. So like teenage years seemed far, far behind me. But with this book and with Feed and with Burger Was, especially those three, when I think about them now, what I realize is, holy crap! Like I was right next to teenagerhood. I was still, uh, I don't know if we're allowed to swear. I was still screwed up by,
You
by,
could say anything. Yeah,
yeah.
you're fine.
Okay. I was still totally fucked up by my teenage years, right? And so, like, when there is this longing for like this relationship or just even like longing to have like sex with someone, and to have it like be powerful and whatever, all of that was super real to me still then because I still was kind of bearing the scars of being a teenager, a screwed up teenager with, like, and so what's interesting to me now thinking back on them is that I seem to be so distant from that time to myself then, and now I realize, wait a second, like the reason those books work in some ways is because you actually were still a teenager emotionally. Like when I wrote Feed, yeah, Feed is making fun of some elements of teen culture, right? um, like the characters who are like wealthy, beautiful, and oversexed, and everyone wants to be that. But like it wouldn't have worked if I was writing it as an adult, going, like looking down and going like, please, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
Instead, like there has to be that tension where I still kind of want to be wealthy, beautiful, and oversexed. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And if there weren't that tension, I don't think the book would be good.
I agree with you, and there's sort of when I think about like YA in general, right? I don't know if it's really like a thing. I'm sure certainly it is, but there's it's a spectrum, right? And so um, I think the really good, if I may be so bold, the really good YA for me is the stuff that, obviously I read this when I was very young, and but I get just as much out of it, even perhaps if not more, as an adult. Um, and I reread this. I mean, I reread this thing like every couple years. I mean, that's how
Oh,
much I
that's fantastic.
yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
I really love this book, and I get more out of it every year, and I understand, and I pick up on references, and I'm like, oh, like, and like some of the humor maybe that didn't work for
Yeah.
me when I was in sixth or seventh grade.
Oh, can I
Uh,
tell you like a fun little hidden thing in the book?
yes, please. This is
Um,
great. I love
so
this.
it actually contains a whole warped version of the Anglican burial service, like just a line every few chapters. So, like, like the psalm that's read at the burial service is usually "I lift my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help." And so, like, I'm like, at one point the character's like, "I lift my eyes to the hills, but no help is coming from there." It's all these little things like that. Like in the midst of life, we are in death, which
To
is one of the
whom may we secure? Is it
seek
what?
for succor. Yeah, in
Yeah,
the original. But in this one, he's just like he says, like he just calls the kid a sucker.
yes,
So
yeah. I
anyway,
remember.
so like there,
Yeah,
it's laid in very quietly, but like I don't think anyone will ever get it. But it was really fun to do.
yeah, and this. So obviously, this was the first thing of yours that I discovered, and so I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, after another reread of it, I was like, let me go online and see if I can like, because I had never tried before to kind of see if there was anyone really out there who shared my love for this thing, and
Yeah.
there is some of it, but a lot of it was like interviews about feed and stuff, and so it seems to me this is perhaps dare I say an underrated piece of your work. Would you agree with that or
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like one of the like I don't know. One of the things that is weird about my career, looking back on it now, is that I do like I hit trends, but I always hit them 5 years early, so I can't actually monetize them. So this was like 5 years before the vampire craze, and then Feed was like 5 years before the dystopian craze. Blah 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 blah. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's so funny.
unfortunately,
I literally have this right here. So, yeah, things like True Blood and like Twilight
right,
had not come out yet.
right.
So like, what was the temperature with vampires when you wrote this? Like, what was
There
like
was none. Like Anne Rice was just coming out with her first vampire books when I wrote that.
interesting?
Um, and um, and for me, it was just like I'd been a kid who liked monsters, and I had a bunch of dreams about vampires. In particular, a scene that actually made it into the book, where like I imagined that I was at a church supper. So I grew up a very religious family. I imagined I was at a church supper, and suddenly realized that the flesh being served in all of the kind of casseroles was human flesh, and that and
It's
then
one
I
of
heard a child say to her father, "Can I have some more?" And the father said, "May I have some more?" And so, like, this kind of like dickish precision, even when you're eating human flesh. Like, I woke up and I was like, whoa, that is an amazing scene. So
that's
that
one of
actually made
my
it into the book.
that's one of my favorite scenes in the book. Like, and there's something so funny about that too. Like the fact that these vampires are so like uptight about grammar is like
Yeah.
is like almost like a microcosm of sort of your satirical style.
Right, right.
Right
Oh
there.
my God, wait, this is so funny because I just saw a meme about this where a vampire, like, holy shit, I totally forgot this. Okay. So a vampire, it's a, thing where a vampire is saying, like, can I come in? And the woman goes, may I come in? And so it's like another vampire foiled by good grammar.
Yeah, that's so funny. I love that. Yeah, like I was saying, like I I've always loved this book, and so just being able to sit here and talk with you about it feels very surreal to me. So
Oh, that's fantastic.
excuse me, yeah, if I'm a little between words right now. But so I will like this this story. I feel like in today's film climate could be like an A24 or a Neon sort of thing. Has anyone ever approached you about adapting this thing, or have you ever thought
A,
about it?
a long time ago, it was optioned, but it hasn't been for a long time. I don't know what the chances would be of it because there've been so much. Like there was a vampire craze. By
Yeah,
the way, I'm sure that this is something that you have seen and probably have loved as much as I did. Did you see Midnight Mass?
I did.
Holy crap, that
Yeah,
series, wasn't it
man.
so good?
I was floored by that show,
Yes.
particularly the performance of Hamish Linklater, who
Hmm.
plays the priest.
Oh
Uh,
my God. It was so pitch perfect. Like it was
Incredible
perfect as
stuff.
a priest, and yet at the same time had this incredible creepiness to it. So, wait, do you come from any kind of religious background?
So, my mom married my stepdad when we were, when I was probably 10 or 11, and so through him we would go to church, and we went to his family was Methodist, so we did spend quite a bit of time every Sunday. If I unless I could get out of it, which rarely happened, but um, we would go to church most Sundays. So there was a fair degree of religious upbringing for me. So um, I wouldn't say that it was perhaps on the same level as someone who was practicing from before, because 10 or 11 is kind of an odd time to get into that, right? Because you're starting to
Yeah.
ask questions, and
Yeah.
I guess you're perhaps less susceptible to suggestion or that sort of thing. So um, I never really bought into it, but I did appreciate the sense of community around it and what it did for like my family and stuff.
Totally. Yeah.
So, and that's sort
Yeah.
of a theme of Midnight Mass as well.
Right, which is why I thought that it struck so deep. It wasn't just that the acting was so good. It wasn't just that the script was really intelligent and kind
Hmm.
of surprising. Like
Yeah,
I didn't see where it was going. I mean, obviously you can generally see where it's going, but you don't get all the little twists, right?
yeah,
But then, and it wasn't just that the aesthetic of the filming was so good. Like that island was so creepy and present, but it also was like that. It was so intelligently done that like strikes to the heart of some of our like fears about what religion is, but
yeah,
also our longing for what religion, what role it could play.
yeah. Man, I mean that show. Like the scene where, so spoilers for Midnight Mass, anyone.
Yeah.
Skip ahead 10 or 20 seconds. But the scene where the girl comes and forgives the guy for shooting her. I mean, I was like in tears, man, because
Oh my god.
his performance is what sells it. Because he is like like being torn asunder, and like everything is being pulled up, and he's like having to reckon with it, and it's so moving. And I mean, the dialogue, like you said, everything. The scene where the two main characters are talking about what they think happens after you die. Um, I
Yeah.
know a lot. I'm perhaps more online than sometimes I'd like to be, and I see
Hmm.
people online like criticizing the show because they're like, it's just people talking. They don't like the monologues, and it's like,
Mm.
and I'm like, you know, teach their own. But like to me, that was some of the best stuff, man. I mean, just so
Yeah.
well written, so well
Yeah, well,
written.
and it just the whole I don't know, yeah, like symbolically it worked, but also like the that woman who's kind of like the deacon, the assistant.
Oh yeah, she's so good, isn't she?
Well, wait, now wait, I saw her in something else recently that was like horror based, or no, like dystopian. What was it? What was she in? And she was like a totally different character, but also really great.
I think her name is Samantha Sloan. She works with Mike Flanagan a lot.
Okay,
Um,
what do you? Well, you're on the like on the in the know for this kind of thing. Do you know what he's working on now?
so Mike Flanagan actually has a film coming out later this year called The Life of Chuck, which is based on a Stephen King story. Um,
Oh,
but it's not a horror story. It's more of a dramatic thing. And the early buzz for that is that it's very, very good. And I'm very excited to see it. And it seems like it's going to be a little bit of a departure for Mike Flanagan because he does a lot of horror stuff. So
yeah,
he did Doctor Sleep. If you've seen
yeah,
that,
yep.
um, and he also did a couple other shows for Netflix. He did The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, and
Right.
he
Yeah.
had one, The Fall of the House of Usher, which was quite good as
Oh
well.
my God, that was what she was in.
Is that the
Right.
one?
That's
Okay,
what I was thinking of. Follow
perfect.
the House of Usher. Also, so smart,
Very
so
well. I loved
like
the way that he was sort of able to weave all these different Poe stories together, and it all
yes.
feels like seamless. Like it was
And
so
right,
great.
and like, but like, talk about monologues. That freaking monologue about like, if life gives you lemons, and
Yeah.
then how the modern businessman understands that opportunity differently from how you might in the past. It
Hmm.
was chilling. Like that was the most frightening thing in that show.
Yeah, he is just so talented. So I'm keep your eye out for The Life of Chuck.
Yeah,
It's got Tom Hiddleston in it if you're familiar with him,
yeah, great.
and then all his like sort of regulars that he works with. So Samantha Sloyan, I'm not sure if
Okay,
I'm pronouncing her last name right, but and then Raul Coley, who played the sheriff in Midnight Mass, and then his
yep.
wife Kate Siegel is in it, and they work together a lot. So um, yeah, okay. So I've asked you a little bit about your different novels, but I do want to kind of get your sense of your tastes as like a film lover. So just as like a break the ice sort of thing, I would love to know. Give me three of your favorite horror films, and then three just non-horror films. It could be anything.
Okay, so definitely The Thing, which I actually recently rewatched this winter and still was floored by it.
Yeah,
You know?
it hits
Just
harder when there's snow on the ground too, doesn't it?
yes.
It just
So I live in a place, I live in northern Vermont, so
yeah.
right over the Canadian border. So it's always good to see that kind of thing. I think It Follows is
Oh
another
yeah.
one that
Yes.
I just, once again, it had that psychological horror and kind of amazing. And by the final scene, all you have to do is have the two characters walking along talking, and there's someone out of focus back in the background just walking in the same direction, and you're freaked out. That to me is the real glory moment when, if you're a horror like filmmaker, is the moment when something using no special effects, nothing unusual about it all, and yet you can make the reader freak out,
Yeah.
or the watcher
Because
freak out.
because of the implication behind what you're seeing.
Exactly.
You
Or
know.
like the moment in The Thing, like when McReady, they're looking for like who's been transformed into this monster, and over in this Arctic base, and the McReady, they're like, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Like, I'm going to go out to my hut, because when I went out there before, I turned the light off, and now the light's on." And just like, holy crap! Like the fact that the fact that turning on a light could make you like, oh, whoa. That's, and the thing is that, like, so I live in a house that's reputedly haunted. This house here, it's not like, I don't believe in ghosts, but like, I understand why in an old house people get freaked out. And you know but I think about the fact that, like, I love movies where small things that would actually freak you out in reality. If I heard actual footsteps in this house in the middle of the night, I would shit my pants. And yet the
Absolutely.
thing is, the way that we do horror so frequently has like this pumped up soundtrack and everything else, so that like someone walking in the house, you don't even think about that. You need a knife in the face before you're actually startled. And so I think anyone who can crank that back and say no, like um shoot, Paranormal Activity, the first one,
Yeah.
that was like that at the time. I'm not
Yeah.
sure it would last, but like, all you're seeing is that couple in their bedroom and then hearing footsteps downstairs. That's enough. And that, I think, is kind of amazing if you can like boil something down like that. Um, so there are three horror films, I guess. Interesting. Like, I would have also said the same thing about Blair Witch Project, but I watched it like 3 years after it came out again. Like, it was one of the only horror movies that actually made me feel uneasy when I went home that night. But when I watched it again 3 years later, somehow it didn't work for me at all. I think because I knew too much about the way that it was made and the circumstances surrounding it and everything.
It's so funny you say that because so you're my second interview that I've ever done on this channel, and the first one was his name is Mike Manello, and he was a producer on the Blair Witch Project,
Oh, okay.
and I got to talk to him about they've recently re-released the movie on Blu-ray that has this really cool collector's edition with like you know, packets in it and everything, and essays on the film and everything. And one of the
Yeah.
interesting things about it was that it was never actually released properly. The process that they had to do to transfer the like the high eight tapes that they actually shot it on,
Hmm.
so that you could project it in a theater.
Hmm.
Something was sort of lost in translation during that process, and as a result, it's never actually looked the way it's supposed to. So it was
Oh.
actually really interesting
Hmm.
talking to him about just the process by which that movie was made, and sort of that peek behind
Yeah.
the curtain. So yeah, it's very funny that you say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was, obviously it was groundbreaking. Like there have been so many good found footage. Well, also so many terrible found footage films since then.
That's the problem with like found footage, right? Like it's such an effective genre when it's done well.
Yeah.
But it's so easy for me to not be able to buy into it because they do these things where they like break the like they'll be playing music like non-diegetically, and I'm like, okay, well,
Yes.
you've broken my, like,
Right.
I'm no longer there, like this
Yeah.
is now like a theme
Right.
park ride for me. Like I'm not there with you in the woods anymore, you
Well, and
know.
also like they can just kind of like hand the camera to people and just record normal stuff, which isn't as crafted. So I also love alien abduction movies.
Yeah, those are good,
Um,
aren't they?
and weirdly enough, there are three alien abduction movies that deal with the Phoenix. What were they called? The Phoenix Lights, which was a real
Oh,
UFO.
is that like the fire in the sky? And
No, Fire in the Sky was that's a different. That's a
that's
different.
different, right?
That's
Okay.
based on a true story. Travis somebody, but and that's actually really a good movie, I think. But the three about the Phoenix Lights, I hate to say, are which is a real event, and then each one of them is a found footage movie where like someone's in the Arizona desert at the same time, and then aliens end up like marauding them. Those were all of those three movies were terrible, and basically the reason is because it was just a bunch of bros with cameras and like recording broness and then finally getting terrified because they're aliens, and then the rest of the movie is like 10 minutes of just like Sage and Scrub just flashing by with people going, oh my god, oh my god, and like you just
Yeah.
it's just not,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't hold your interest.
It, so like you were saying with that final shot of It Follows, right?
Yeah.
Just that one and what I love about that is like a lot of horror films will end with like a musical sting and a loud noise, and it's like a freaky image, and like and that's how they'll end it, and then they'll like roll the credits, right, just to get like
Yeah.
one last scare in. And
Yeah.
that's such a lazy approach in my opinion. And so when you're able to really craft something like that ending of It Follows, that really speaks to another level of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And with Blair Witch as well, like I think of the scene where they find just like a pile of rocks outside their tent,
Yes.
and it's like they were able to make a pile of rocks scary. And
Yes.
and it's like that's that secret sauce that not everyone
Yeah.
has. And then there are people who don't find that scary. And again, to each
Each
their
to
own.
his own.
But I find the implication of, because it's all about that word, right? That implication of like there was someone outside your tent while you were sleeping, and
Right.
they could have done anything, but they chose to do that, and why? And you don't
Yes.
and you don't know, and it's like all these
Yeah.
questions that you find yourself asking.
Well, and that movie in particular, one of its strengths the first time I saw it, and which may be why I wasn't didn't work as well for me the second
Yeah,
time. But
and there's
the
nothing wrong with
first,
that. I want to reiterate for people watching as well, because I know not everyone loves Blair Witch Project. It's very divisive. So
yeah,
but you
yeah,
can appreciate the craftsmanship of it, which is good.
totally. And one of the things that I thought that was actually a really nice touch is that the mythology of it doesn't cohere quite. Like there are
Yeah.
too many competing stories, which they hear early on when they go to that town. Is it in Maryland?
Uh,
Anyway,
yeah, Burkittsville, Maryland. Yeah.
yeah. So they're in Maryland. They go talk to a bunch of people. They hear stories about like the witch. They hear stories about abducted children. But all of these things like don't exactly cohere.
Yeah.
And that's actually a powerful part of the movie because you don't know exactly what it is you're dealing with ever. And like in the end, then in that final shot, which I won't give away, it calls back
Yeah.
one of those stories. And something about that, about the scrambling of your ability to actually, because usually in the horror movie the idea is you hear the rumors, terrifying things happen, and then like three-fourths of the way through the rumor is clarified into like a settled single myth this is what's going on, this is what you have to fight, this is what you have to escape, and so you know what's going on. This, to kind of retain that tension all the way through, was really smart. Although that might have been why the second time I wasn't like, the gears weren't slipping for me, because I knew what that I wasn't going to get an answer in a particular way.
Yeah, there's always like that sort of exposition dump, right? Where like they go to the expert in the
Right.
occult, and
Yeah.
they're able to they go in a book and they're like, oh, this is the demon that's haunting
Yeah.
your house, and like this is what you have to
Right.
do, and it
It,
leaves no room for imagination, and that's what's
right.
so great. It's so funny. I have a video essay on my channel about Blair Witch Project. It's one of my best
Ah,
performing videos, and that's
yeah.
one of the things that I talk about early on, where nobody in the town really seems to be 100% sure about
Yes.
what's going on, and
Such a smart move.
it's almost like they'd like to be able to tell you that it's all made up, but there's that little bit of like doubt that they're like, well, maybe it is, and so they're like, everyone seems to be kind of on the fence and just generally unsure of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly, like, well, in the same way that people talk about this as one of the real strengths of like H.P. Lovecraft and why he's so enduring,
Yeah.
is because he knows how to not tell you entirely what you're seeing.
hmm there's so much to that, of just presenting someone with some information and just trusting them to do what they will,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not and just kind of trusting that your audience isn't dumb. I feel like that's
Yeah.
something that you do.
Right.
Just kind of trusting that they'll be able to figure it out, and
Yeah.
whatever their interpretation is valid, because it's they came to it of their own accord. You didn't lead
Well,
them to it.
and I love shows like Severance is doing this for me right now. Shows where you are seeing something and you feel like, oh, I'm in the hands of someone who is really intelligent and is perhaps actually more intelligent than me, and that's kind of exciting because I'm not going to guess ahead of time
Yeah,
what's going on. It's kind of a cool feeling when you're like a little overwhelmed, you know?
yeah, where you like, I'm in good hands with this person,
Yes.
and like that's not something you really come across often.
Right.
Um, you know, with like slasher films where you're like trying to guess who the killer is,
Yeah.
and there's nothing worse than when you guess it like very early on.
Yeah.
But it's very rare, I feel like, when they can kind of surprise you in the third act and be like, actually, it was this person, and here were all the
Hmm.
clues leading up to it, and you're
Right.
like, oh, that totally went over my head. Because it's one thing when you can really surprise me, but when you can do the work to make it feel earned, and
Yeah.
have it be so that, oh, that was them the whole time and I really didn't see it, like that's it's a it's an undervalued thing, I think,
Well,
with
like the very divisive final season of True Detective.
oh, is that the one with Jodie Foster?
Yeah.
I didn't watch that
So
one.
okay, well, I got to. I mean, it's very different than the earlier ones.
Yeah.
I thought it was wonderful, but like I'm sure that if you poll your viewers, you're going to find that the final episode totally divides people, because there are some surprises in it, and I think that they are in a way prepared, but like you got to watch it all the way to the end. I don't know. I don't want to say anything more, but
I wanted to check that one out because that first season of True Detective is just
yeah,
one of the best things
yeah.
I've ever seen.
Well,
It's
okay.
incredible.
Here's an interesting thing, though, for you as a horror aficionado. I think it was different for those of us who like love the history of horror, seeing that first season, because we knew the Robert Chambers King in Yellow references were leading to something specific and supernatural. And I think that some people, like a lot of viewers who weren't into horror but who saw it as a detective show, were kind of like frustrated by the fact that there was this oddly kind of mystical element to the ending, to that final episode. And I think that that was an interesting thing that kind of divided people about that first season.
Yeah, it's I would say it's like 90% of the show is this like very real look at these people, and it's very procedural, and it's like this is what it would be like, and there's a lot of red tape
Yeah,
and all this stuff, and then when in that last episode, that last 10%, they really kind of show you everything, and it's all paid off. And for me, that worked because I love
yeah,
both of those things equally, but I could
yeah.
see someone who is not super on board with all that stuff, because
Right.
it is open for interpretation, right? Like
Yeah,
because
right.
McConaughey is like, sort of he's
On
kind
the
of,
edge.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's like on that borderline of consciousness and
yeah,
death, and you know, he's an unreliable narrator in that
Yeah.
moment, and so we.
But I think it's just interesting to think about from the point of view of craft that even just their use of the word carcosa
Oh
for a
yeah,
small subset of viewers, that's immediately going to put us into a different world than than a normal police procedural.
that's a good point. Yeah, for sure. Because then from that point on, the whole context is different for me than it might be for someone else.
Exactly. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
I'm watching, because I have this certain set of expectations now that may or may not
Right.
be paid off. So
Right. Right. You know that there might well be something kind of like Lovecraftian or whatever about it. There might be
yeah,
something, yeah, yeah. But I think one of the things I think that defines the horror movies that really are powerful to me, and this actually also can tie into, if you want, the way that my a lot of my books work, is if there's something central about the symbolism that gets at our anxieties about the real world. So it's not just about like a vampire on an island, it's about like what is organized religion's role in a community. I'm talking about like with Midnight Mass, or in The Thing, what does it mean that none of us really truly know each other in reality, and that like a human face can mask all sorts of strange desires and strange angers, that kind of thing. Or like It Follows, which seems to be about either maybe like the transmission of sexual violence, or about the transmission even of sexual disease, like STDs. Like there's some there, it makes us anxious. It's not that like you sit there picking it apart going like, well, this is this and this is this, like symbolically this is this. It's that like it hits at like an anxiety that's already there in a symbolic way, so that we get more worried about it than we would if it was just sort of like, oh, it's a ghost.
yeah, and then there's that element of like losing your purity as well with It Follows, and sort of
Right.
growing from a child to an adult, and like we kind of perceive that transition in our head is like this,
Yeah.
and then when it actually happens, it's it doesn't it's not super. We kind of build these things up as like a pedestal, and then you kind of
Yeah.
manifest these all these like anxieties about it, and so maybe it could be interpreted that way. That's the beautiful thing about It Follows, is there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, horror films in general are just great at they the best ones I find can tap into, it's like social commentary,
Yeah.
and then they can talk about like the anxieties and things we're dealing with on a human level, and it helps us to process them by like these anxieties by having us go along on this journey, and kind of seeing how it affects the characters, and we they almost function as a surrogate for the viewer, and it's a cathartic experience at times, when it's done well, and that's like the spectrum of horror films, is just knowing that they're not all kind of created equally, and
Yeah.
that's the fun of discovering a really really powerful one, when
Yeah.
you're able to be like, oh, this is doing something special.
Well, and it's great that there are companies like A24 which are pretty like reliable. Like I know my mind is probably going to be blown, by an A24 horror movie.
Yeah, yeah, they're I haven't loved them all, but what I can always say
Yeah.
is that they're always made by someone with a distinct voice and something that they're
Right.
trying to say.
Right. Like
And
there's that one with like what's her name? Kiernan
oh,
Shipka.
are you talking about the Black Coat's daughter?
It's the one that's set in like I think like a Catholic girls' school over
Yeah,
vacation.
yeah, Black Coat's daughter.
I didn't love that one, but I still was like, I still felt things during it. Like
Interesting.
it's still like, even though like the plot, I was like, yeah, take it or leave it. But still, like the acting was amazing. The visual sense was so. It's just what you said. There still is a voice there, and that's all that I really care about.
Yeah, that one in particular, I actually enjoy, but it's again, it's divisive, and I find that more often than not, the most divisive horror films are the ones that I mean, I can tend to gravitate towards those. And not just because I'm like a contrarian or whatever. There's plenty of uh, popular ones that I don't find myself liking, but
Right.
with that one, the I really like the environment is very oppressive. It's very
Totally.
you really feel like the bleakness of it, and that's
Yeah.
something that can be said of a lot of winter horror films as well. Just that sort of
Yeah.
isolation that comes from
Right.
just being snowed in, and
Yeah.
it's not a simple matter of just getting in your car and going when the weather itself is sort of playing a role in kind of keeping you where you are. And there's
Right.
something to be said for that. So we are coming up on over an hour. I don't know what your
Okay.
schedule is like.
Yeah, sure. We can. Yeah.
Sure, awesome. So yeah, and then so also just give me three non-horror films that maybe you find yourself, finding the urge to come back to, something that's really kind of made a mark on you over the years.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I'm not sure that any of these would be of interest to like your viewers necessarily because they aren't horror, but like, Um, Fellini's movie Eight and a Half was one that kind of blew my mind when I was a kid. It's a movie that's kind of it's about being a creator, but it's also just kind of like a lot of his movies, sort of also about being male, about all of the kind of contrary desires you have and things. And it's very surreal, but at the same time, somehow it all, you feel something strongly, even though the feeling of the plot of the movie is very alien, not alien in a sci-fi way, just it's about a, in one way it's about a filmmaker who's making a science fiction movie, but it's not really about that. It's really just about like all the weird crap we go through with male desire. And so I kind of like that movie. I mean, I don't just kind of like it, like I worshiped it when I was younger. I was just like, how amazing to be able to make me feel something even in a story that isn't entirely coherent, you know.
Yeah, I've that's something that's been on my radar for quite some time.
Yeah.
I do love horror films, but I have a whole shelf over here filled with, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just love stories and just
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other ones that like really. I mean, obviously, there's so many movies that I've loved. Like I really like all of these 1930s screwball comedies. Also, just there's a feeling of kind of like lightness to them that sometimes it's useful. It's useful to feel that like all those people like Irene Dunn kind of like falling in love with the wrong person, and they're also super. There's a super American feel to those in a way that I like. I'm trying to think of other things that I really have. I mean, I don't know. There's just so many movies that I've loved that who knows. Uh, yeah, like without a sort of specific genre, it's hard to kind of like come up with something on the spot that I'd say what are my three favorites. You know?
no, I get you. It's a daunting question, and it's not something that I would ever necessarily want to be asked myself. Yeah, without a genre, it's sort of like, yeah, you're just
Yeah. Oh, well, one thing, we talked about talking about was the experience of having a book made into a movie. So, like, my book, Landscape of the Invisible Hand, was turned into a movie a couple of years ago, starring Tiffany Haddish and Asante Black. And yeah, and it was super interesting. Like, I went down to Georgia to watch them film it because, like, Georgia, as those who watch The Walking Dead know, Georgia stands in now. Georgia and Vancouver are basically all American cities, you know, like,
yeah.
um, so so I went down to Georgia, which for this movie they turned into Rhode Island, um, and it was totally fascinating because like it's the days that I was there, they were shooting on a at like an abandoned mini mall that they had just come in. It was a real mini mall, like cars, commuters going past, and they had come in and like made a bunch of fake storefronts in that mini mall, and like a couple of things that were specifically, so it was weird because here I've written this book alone sitting on my porch in Vermont in the middle of nowhere, and now I'm watching like a staff of like 100 people swarming around with like giant reflectors and things to turn this story into something visible. And like a couple of things that were weird. One that was really weird is I noticed some trash on the ground, and then realized that the trash was like a bag from a fake soup franchise that I made up in the book. So it wasn't even real trash. Even the trash, they made bags for it, crumpled them up, and thrown them on the ground. That was kind of amazing. Um, Another similar kind of thing was I had there were billboards above them all, which I didn't even take notice of until the end of the day when I realized that one was for like an alien food supplement, and the other one was for a a pawn shop that actually would deal in human organs. And it was just so funny to me that like hundreds of Atlanta commuters were driving by and probably just going like, "Oh yeah, pawn shops are accepting human organs now. Yeah, it's the South. Who the hell knows?" You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was when I watched the movie, I had just finished the book, so everything was
Yeah,
really fresh, and all the changes they did stand out to me, but they felt like they felt like maybe the right changes. I don't know, something that is um, corresponding with sort of a cinematic language, I guess. Like we talked about, they omitted the Merrick's disease
yeah,
from the movie, which I guess would have been hard to sell to a studio or something, right?
yeah,
With a component like that, but I think thematically it kind of retains the heart of what the story is about, and I found that to be I really appreciated that because they didn't kind of forsake the story or anything like that. They kind of made, I think, what they considered the necessary changes, and I did enjoy the movie. I thought it was very good.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
I'm not sure I would have made the same decisions as they made all the time,
yeah,
but I still I thought that they really got the mood right for a lot of it, and I really really admired that. That the writer director is kind of a genius guy. He if actually there's a good his second movie would be of incidental interest to horror fans because it's about the guy's name is Corey Finley. His second movie is actually about two kind of like prep school girls who decide to murder someone.
I've heard of this one. I think it's called Thoroughbreds, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I hear about that movie a lot actually. I think it's
yeah.
got
It's Anya Taylor Joy. Is that her name? Yeah.
yes, that's
So,
right.
and I
Yes,
think it might be her first. It may be her cinematic debut or something.
it
Her
could
first
be.
big role.
Yeah,
Anyway, so yeah. So very stripped down, very different than Landscape with the Visible Hand. But yeah. So yeah, it was really interesting to see all of that and to uh, yeah, to kind of like, well, okay. One thing that I think might actually be interesting is I talked a lot to the visual effects guy who was standing around the day I was there. So and he said, everyone thinks of my job as being about aliens and lasers and that kind of thing. But here's what I actually spend most of my time doing. And we're standing, as I said, in this lot in an actual old mini mall, and he points, he goes, "You see that white truck over there?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "So that white truck is not ours. And it's going to appear in the background of every single shot in that direction. And it's going to be a spot of color that we don't want. And we're not allowed to tow it or anything. What do we do?" He's like, "I'm going to spend hours, like taking that white truck out of every shot that's in that direction." Or at another point, like Tiffany Haddish throws her shoe at someone. This is a scene that was actually deleted from the final movie. She throws her shoe at someone and it hits them. And he's like, "Well, so I saw all the takes. The shoe never hit the guy." So the special effects guy was who was, he did like the tiger for the Life of Pi, that kind of thing. The special effects guy was saying to me like, we can actually calculate the cost of what it will cost if they want that shoe to hit the guy, because like it's going to take a day and a half to get someone to form a shoe online, to form like a CGI version of a shoe that behaves with the weight of a shoe and the shadow of a shoe and everything else, and then to get it to like thrown at the guy. So he's like, there's a joke, and you can say it's going to cost you, like $5,000 to make that joke. Do you want to make that joke, or does the shoe fall into the gutter like it did in reality? So that kind of thing, that I thought was really cool. I just thought that your viewers might be interested in that. Like,
I'm interested. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I find the process of filmmaking very interesting. Just outside of story and act and like just the minutia that actually goes into like what your budget is and how you can feasibly do this thing. it's the stuff that people don't talk about that I find really interesting as someone who would like to make a short film one day. Um,
Mm.
so
Well,
I,
like they added like more than $1 million to the budget of this movie because it was shot in the later days of COVID, and so everyone had to like there were all these things about what hotels are they staying in? Are they in pods? We had to like pull on masks and then take the masks off for the shot and then pull on masks. I ruined a take by leaving my mask on. I was an extra and I
I was
ruined my
looking for you because I was like, I wonder if he has a cameo.
I
Which?
did, but they took out that scene. But it was
Oh,
funny
okay.
because then like they said, "Oh, someone has a mask on, so stop the shot." So I ruined the take. And then Tiffany Haddish, she snitched on me. She was like, "It was the author. It was the author guy."
That's so funny. Yeah, I was looking for you, and like, there's a wedding scene where she's
Yeah,
getting like married to the Veuve, and I was like, oh,
yeah.
if he's in any scene, I think it would be this because this might be
I
a good place.
wish.
This might be a place to have a cameo, just sitting in the on a seat somewhere.
I totally wish I'd been in that scene because I thought that that scene, which is not in the book, we should add,
Yeah,
but that
that's
I thought that
totally.
that scene was like a genius addition.
Yeah, that whole plot line is totally fabricated for the movie, but again, I felt like it worked, and even if
I
it's
did
not.
too.
Yeah, even if it's not a direct one-to-one adaptation, because I mean, let's be real, you very rarely see those like a one-to-one. It's something's
Yeah,
always got to be changed.
yeah,
Um, well, gotta be is a relative term, but that's sort of the way it seems to shake out anyway. But yeah, I found myself really being okay with some of the changes that they did make.
yeah.
I was a little I was hoping to see the art contest that didn't seem to make it in because I really like
Yeah,
that
they
finale.
changed the form of it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Instead, he like goes, and it's like their whole. I guess it's the Vuv ship or whatever, and there's no other like humans there or whatever. But
yeah.
yeah, so I mean, how did that process come about? Like, how were you approached for this from inception? Like, did they come to you
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, we want to make this book or into a
Yeah.
movie"? Or
Yeah, totally. I mean, like the way that it works, and I'm sure you know this, but just for the crowd, it's like they option the book first, which means they pay you a small amount of money. That means that for a year and a half, they and no one else have the right to make the movie. Doesn't mean they're going to make the movie. Most options just die. Many options are then they re up them. They pay you for another year and a half. So for example, right now. Uh, Fox, Disney have optioned feed. And who knows? Like, I won't know. Like, I just talked to them the other day. I won't know anything until the middle of the summer. It probably like, will it come about? I have no idea. But the idea is that they pay you a small amount of money at that point, but you also make the contract for how much they're going to pay you if they do decide to make it. And at the point at which it's greenlit and it's really going to happen, that's when you get the purchase price, which is the action. That's when you are literally selling the rights in perpetuity for that. So I got to see the script for Landscape of Invisible Hand a bunch of times while it was being written. And once again, I was immediately really impressed with Corey's writing and the way he caught the tone in a lot of those scenes. But then, yeah, so but for example, I'm not seeing the script for the feed project. I know that there is a script, but they've decided not to share that. So which is fine. Like like you give over control for these things. That's part of the legal process.
gotcha. And is that going to be a show or a film? Do you know?
They say it's going to be a film, but I don't know. Like it's like I mean, it's all very unreal at this point, and it makes sense if you are a beginning author and this is happening for you. I should tell you that it always makes sense to have very low expectations, and like it doesn't matter even if it looks like a sure thing. Just like control yourself, continue to eat ramen, and
Yeah.
just wait until because like nothing is real until it's real in Hollywood.
Yeah, I want to ask. You had mentioned that Thirsty had been optioned. How soon after Thirsty came out did that happen? And sort of, I don't know if that's like a
I
if
don't
you
really
have it.
remember at this point. I mean, it came out really early. I was like 25 years old. So I feel like it was like a year or so afterwards that it got optioned. And it was optioned for 5 or 6 years at least. before that. But like you never know when those options are going to go. Like I have a nonfiction book about called Symphony for the City of the Dead, which is about the siege of Leningrad during World War II. And that's a case where, like, a Korean horror director, in fact, weirdly enough, even though it's a nonfiction book, um, 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 Park Chan Wook.
Oh
Um,
wow. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
familiar.
so he optioned that for like 5 years or so. And then what happened was, because it's about Russia during World War II, like the Ukraine war started, and he was like, no, 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 no.
Oh man, that's
Yeah,
unfortunate. Man, that'd
yeah,
be sick. That would be.
I know.
That would have been. Well, I won't say would have been because it could still happen. Maybe when.
No, but I mean, it's not option anymore. That's the thing. Like, I don't think it'll happen now. But I
Okay.
would like. I love his movies, so I was, and it just came about because there was a Korean edition of that book. He read it and he was like, "Oh my God, what the Russians went through in World War II. There's kind of a similarity between what happened with Korea and Japan in World War II." So yeah, so you never know when these things are going to come out of the woodwork at you, and it's really wonderful that people have been, even if they don't make a movie, it's wonderful that they've been moved so much by your work that they even are taking that idea seriously.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be really nuts, right? Because as an author, I don't know, is that something you ever think about when you're writing? Like, oh, this would make a cool book one or a good cool movie one day. Like, is that something that, or do you just kind of try to be like, yeah, it's best not to really think about that sort of thing and just focus on the
I
work?
don't think about it like literally or seriously, but I think very much in terms of images when I'm writing. And therefore I'm kind of like seeing it as a movie partially. Then in fact, one of the things that I think is to speak very frankly, one of the things that I think is a flaw with some of my earlier like adventure books written like, a while ago, was that I didn't really realize that describing action moves at a super different pace than action on the screen. So the same thing that can be like exciting and thrilling or funny or whatever on the screen, like a Jackie Chan scene, if you try to describe a Jackie Chan fight scene or something, suddenly it becomes unfunny and slow moving. And it's very, very different. Like it's so hard to do some of that action stuff, which has a real joy when it's coming at you like this, and when you're writing it out, the same events can seem much more laborious. And I think that that's kind of a flaw of some of my earlier books.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you just not, you weren't really thinking about it in that sense, right? So,
Well, I was just thinking in terms of visuals, like, oh, I would love it if this were a movie and this happened and then this happened, you
okay,
know.
I see what you mean.
And then the thing is, you write it, and in fact, the pacing for the reader or for the viewer is totally different.
Yeah, there's a lot of legwork that an image can do,
Yeah.
as opposed to a bunch of descriptive words. So
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
and actually, this is a great example of like what the like from Landscape of the Invisible Hand. I talked about this at Sundance when the movie opened. So, like the Vav, I wanted to make them seem incredibly alien. So they're not shaped like humans at all. They're not humanoid. So I almost did not describe them. There are two times I described them basically. One time I say that they look kind of like a rocky coffee table, and that the way that they speak is that they scratch a fin against a rough part of their body, and so that when they speak, it sounds a little bit like someone walking in corduroys.
Yes, I
Those are
remember.
the
Yes,
yeah,
walking aggressively, I think you say.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
or
good, yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I those and so to create the alienness, in other words, I left a hole where they're not being described well. They're not like they're never really described in detail. And that's like the writer's approach to
Yeah.
making them alien.
Let the
But
reader kind of conjure it up in their head.
totally. And let the reader like not understand them exactly, because in the way that if you first saw a creature that was not of the earth, you're not going to understand its morphology exactly.
Yeah, it's sort of that. That's like that Lovecraftian thing, right?
Yeah,
Where
right.
we can't feasibly comprehend what this would look like.
Right.
We'd go
But
insane first.
for Corey and the people making the movie and that special effects guy I'm talking about, they have to go the other way. To make the alien alien, they have to actually know precisely its weight when it's like dropped onto a sofa cushion. Like you have to be able to see the sofa cushion bend the exact amount for it to like feel for you to understand their weight. The glistening of their skin has to be exactly right. So like it's, in other words, it's the exact opposite. I have to describe it too little. They have to go into like incredible detail thinking through the physicality of this monster to actually, have it realistic and have it be weird. Even to have it be weird, you have to be able to go into the details. So there's a good example of like how film and writing take you two opposite directions in your craft for the same effect of alienness.
Would you say that was one of the most challenging parts about the process of being involved in the film of landscape?
No,
Just
because
kind of.
that was all their problem, not mine.
Oh, you didn't have to give them any sort of input or anything, or they just.
Nope, nope, no. They were just like they took my description and did what they wanted to with it,
Oh,
and they,
awesome.
like
Okay.
yeah, which was kind of fun. It was fun to see what they came up with.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what your role was. If you were just kind of there to oversee, and were you there just kind of
No.
having
Well, when I
fun,
went
or
down for those 2 days, it was because I was supposed to appear in a scene as an extra. It's a scene
right,
that they
right
cut. But then also, it's the scene like in the book, pretty close to the beginning, where the mother is waiting in line to see if she's going to get a job at
at
Heather's
the yeah,
bucket of broth. Yeah. So, and then like a businessman kind of assaults her.
yeah.
So that was the scene that I was in, but they cut it. But anyway, yeah. So I didn't have much of a role in terms of like advisory capacity. I just went down to see it, and everyone was so nice on the set. It was not very Hollywoody feeling. Like one of the great things, in fact, about Georgia now is that there are so many career movie people there doing like technical stuff, lighting, sound, whatever, that they can live in a normal place and be normal humans and still have major careers in Hollywood, which is unlike in Hollywood itself, where everyone is in that weird la la land.
Yeah, that must be nice and probably refreshing too, just to kind of
Yeah.
everyone's human, where
Yeah.
it's
You
not.
live in like a real city.
Yeah, you're not getting like big timed by some big Hollywood people or anything like
Right.
that.
Yeah. And Tiffany Haddish, let me say, was like a total prince. She like she really got along with the like the crew. She had taken them out like bowling the night before I got there. Like she was really, really a wonderful presence on the set too.
She's one of the shining sort of parts of the film for me. Her
Totally.
performance is really fun, and
Yeah.
yeah, she's just very real, and she comes across super sincere, and it's nice to hear that that's how she is in real life too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, anyway, so there you go. That's, some of the insight into like that I got at least. So in some ways, I'm very sheltered here. I'm in the woods of Vermont, but yet like for professional reasons, I have to kind of like reach out to that world and try to understand it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there's a real value to that. Just kind of being able to step outside of what
Yeah.
you know, and that seems to be
Yeah.
something that you do quite often. Just kind of
Yeah.
being able to put yourself in different situations, and just kind of seeing how you
Yeah.
adapt to them.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and that's why I think, like I think it's interesting with your job, like you are also having to kind of contact that world and see it somewhat from the outside.
Yeah. Are you referring to my reaching out to you, or?
No, no, I mean like you looking at the film industry,
Ah, yes, yes. Okay, okay.
and like you, because you obviously do have a sense of the professional stuff that's going on behind these movies also. By the way, Guillermo del Toro and Lovecraft, are we going to get his Mountains of Madness?
Well, I know he's got a Frankenstein movie coming out this year.
Okay.
Guillermo's doing Frankenstein. Is that like his passion project? Mountain.
Yeah, he's been trying to make At the Mountains of Madness for like 12 years. And like everyone gets excited when he's done with a project. And then there's always some reason that, in fact, like it's the studios kind of like shunt him towards something else. And I just feel like At the Mountains of Madness would make sorry, it's a Lovecraft story for the viewers. It's a Lovecraft story set like in the Antarctic. Ancient civilization remains are found by a crew and horrible things start to happen. It's such a good premise. I really hope he does it.
I would love to see that too. I think he's one of our most underutilized filmmakers, and I'm sure Frankenstein is obviously something he's very passionate about.
Yeah.
You kind of have hints of like universal monsters in a lot of his work.
Yeah.
The Shape of Water is very much like Creature of
Yes.
Black Lagoon, but it's like this is a human and not a
Right.
monster, and it's like the monsters are the humans. That sort of dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, so I do get excited. I didn't know actually that this was a thing that he was kind of pursuing.
Yeah, check
Um,
it out. And if I don't know if you ever, I mean, like I don't, like if you ever interview him, please press him to do it.
that would be a dream for sure.
You should totally try to interview him.
Well,
He just, I
yeah,
don't know what he's like or anything, but
Well,
like,
that's what I was kind of alluding to when I asked you that. I wasn't sure what you meant, but yeah, there is sort of this kind of just Hail Mary thing where you're just like, hey, if they respond, they respond. Like that's how it
right.
was with Mike Manello and
Yeah,
the Blair Witch guy. So, and it's on that to that point, I'll just say the fact that you and him were the first two interviews I ever did, it's going to be hard for whoever comes next to kind of live up to that because Blair Witch is a movie that I would hold in my like top five ever horror films, and
yeah,
I'm speaking to one of my favorite authors, so
that's amazing. Yeah,
it's going
yeah,
to be a tough challenge for anyone else to live up. But I mean, Guillermo would be up there for sure. I don't even
yeah,
know
yeah,
how I would
yeah.
go. I don't know how I would go about doing that. I'm sure
Well,
he's very
if it ever
busy.
happens, please press him about the Mountains of Madness. I think it would be an amazing. Like, there are very few movies I'm excited about ahead of time. That is one that I would be.
I will give you my promise that should that ever come across my desk, I will absolutely press him about that. But yeah, no, that's something that the idea of movies being real. It's like you hear so much about movies being made. This is in production. This is in production, and then it like things fizzle out. There's another book series that I enjoy, the Aragon series from Christopher Paolini. I'm not sure if you're
Yep.
familiar,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
but his those books were also supposed to be made into a show by Disney Plus, and that was announced some time ago, and we haven't really heard any movement on that. So
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I've never like even though we're in the same field, he's actually one YA author I've never met. So yeah,
really interesting. Well, I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure I'm not. I don't just assume you guys all like know each other or anything, but
Well, we kind of do. I mean, like we all go to the same conferences and stuff, so we
oh,
quite
really? That's
frequently
cool.
do know each other. Yeah, yeah,
Wow. Okay, I didn't think about that. No, that's very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean that would. There's a lot of things that I'd like to see being made, but then I also know that there's a lot of like red tape that usually
yeah.
drags these things out, and nothing's really real to me until I like see a trailer for it or something like that.
Totally, yeah. And anyway, like if it's a book you love, you're likely to be disappointed. So
That's the other thing too. Like, so same with you, where you try to manage your expectations. I tend to try to do the same because I'm like, how could they possibly capture this subtle nuance and this
right,
thing that's so, you know, bound to the medium of the written word, and it's like
yeah,
it's an obstacle for the filmmaker to
yeah,
overcome, and not for me. So I don't envy
yeah,
them. It's hard sometimes because I'm like, I don't know how you would do this.
yeah.
Um, but anyway, we're coming up on an hour and a half, so I don't want to
Yeah,
take up
so we
too
should
much.
probably go. I should go make a sandwich.
Yeah,
I,
same.
we don't want to wear the viewers out, but thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. This was kind of all over the place. There was so much that I wanted to talk to you about, so I wanted to try to do my best to kind of just hit on a lot of different
Totally.
things. So hopefully it
Yeah.
wasn't too scattered for the
I love the
viewers.
conversation. I had a great time. Oh, can you just sorry, repeat to me the name of the Swedish movie I should go see? So
Oh, it's called Speak No Evil.
Speak No Evil. Okay. Yeah.
There's an American remake as well.
Yeah, but I'll mainline the real thing. Raw
Yeah,
dog the real thing.
if it seems like your cup of tea, definitely
Yeah.
check that one out. It's
Okay.
pretty cool. So yeah, thank you for being so generous with your time. Again,
Thank
it's a
you.
real honor for me to get to talk to you. So yeah, just really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, have a great day.
Thank you. All right, bye guys. Take it easy.
Bye.